It is incumbent on me to announce who my chaplain is for the ensuing council year. That task set me thinking, and I'm afraid you're going to hear me say this frequently. We are elected to work for, on behalf of, and for the benefit of our constituents. But our constituents are not necessarily white Christian constituents. We should realize that and therefore recognize other faiths. So tonight, I'm pleased to welcome, as the first representative of another faith, Iman Asad from the Lichfield Mosque, who is going to give us a short homily followed by a Muslim prayer. So Iman Asad, Assalamu alaikum.
Hello everyone, hope you all well. Nahmadu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem. After praising Almighty God and sending salutations to our beloved Prophet, thank you for the opportunity, first of all, for giving us the opportunity to come here and speak. My name is Imam Asad, and I am the Imam and the Minister of the Mosque here in Lichfield. I have been given strict orders for 3 minutes only. So as soon as this 3 minutes is over, you can give me a nod or a wave. So I'm here to reflect briefly on the role of Islam in our community and how we can work together to build a more inclusive, diverse, and united Lichfield. At the heart of Islam, there is always a message, and this message is of peace, compassion, and community service. Values that are universal and deeply needed in today's world, especially. The Quran, Almighty God mentions that, O mankind, we created you from a single male and female and made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. This is a verse mentioned in the Quran. So this verse actually captures the essence of diversity. Our differences are not a threat. Our differences are not a threat, but a gift, a way to build understanding. Islam teaches that no race, ethnicity, or nationality is superior to any other. The only measure of worth is a person's character and his good deeds. This is why our final prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that all mankind is from Adam and Eve, and no Arab has superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have superiority over an Arab, except by piety and good actions. This message was delivered over 1400 years ago, and it still resonates today, especially in towns like Lichfield, where we are becoming more diverse and interconnected. This goes on to show, it reminds me of another verse which the Prophet, peace be upon him, mentioned, that the best of people are those who are the most beneficial to others. Now, the sense of service, togetherness, is something Muslims bring to every community that they live in, including here in Lichfield as well. But diversity and inclusion doesn't happen automatically. They require intentional listening to the voices of all communities, spaces and events that reflect all our backgrounds and beliefs, education that teaches mutual respect and shared values, and a shared commitment to challenge discrimination, racism, Islamophobia whenever it arrives. I will finish by mentioning that I truly believe that if we were to listen to one another, walk alongside each other, and act with mutual respect, Lichfield can be a leading example of unity, inclusion, and hope, not just for now, but for generations to come. So let's build a city where we all want for each other the same dignity, the same safety and opportunity that we want for ourselves. And I will end with a small prayer for all you respected people over here, that I pray that Almighty God, He guides myself first and our city leaders to justice and wisdom. Bless this council with unity, compassion, and strength. Help us work together to serve all people with fairness, humility, and hope. Amen. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't go over the 3 minutes.
Thank you, Imam Asa.
Thank you so much.
And I hope to see you on October the 12th in the cathedral
Yes,
for the civic
October.
service. And I
Okay,
hope
thank
you've
you
got
so
it in the
much.
diary.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
somebody will show you the way out.
I
Because
do need to quickly go. I've got a class going on. But I was more than happy to come out of the class. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
please be seated. Right, the first item on the agenda is, are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillors Cross, Galvin and Ho, and Councillor Strachan is going to endeavour to be here, but he's given his apologies as a precaution in case he's not able to make it.
Thank you. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Councillor Henshaw.
Leader, Chair, I wish to declare an interest re item number 5, the report of the leader concerning the Greenway. I am chairman of the Lichfield Rail Promotion Group, which has a long-term aim of restoring the old railway line to rail traffic. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Henshaw. Minutes of the last meeting. Can I take the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of May 2025 as a correct record? I see no raised hands. The minutes are approved. Item 4, Chair's announcements. Well, you'll see in the agenda the list of events that I have visited over the past month. One thing that I feel terrible about, and I apologise to my Vice Chair, Councillor Marshall, I didn't include an event he had been to because I was just asked to supply my list. So I apologise, Councillor Marshall, who went to Newcastle on the 22nd of May and 22nd of June, and had a wonderful time and was looked after very well. I'm also supposed to announce what my charity will be for this year. And I have decided that my charity will be an organisation which a lot of you seem to be aware of, Liberty Jamboree, which is a Lichfield-based organisation. And if I just read out what it says about Liberty Jamborees, it is an organisation that looks after mentally incapacitated people from the ages of 8 to 35. So I have chosen that as my charity for this year. Another announcement I would like to make is that what is called the Chair's Civic Service at the Lichfield Cathedral is on the 12th of October 25. And there's just something I'd like to say about that, because I appreciate that not all councillors voted for me to be chair. However, at that ceremony in the cathedral, you will not be supporting me, but you would be supporting and representing Lichfield District Council. And it is an opportunity for our constituents to see the whole council turn out for a ceremonial event. Again, I do appreciate that you may not believe in pageantry and public ceremony, but this is an occasion where during the service there is an act of dedication when the councillors affirm their commitment as councillors to our Lichfield constituents. So I'd ask you all to join me on that day to show that we are a corporate body of councillors. So I think that is all of the announcements that I have to make. So if we can move on to item 5, the report of the Leader of the Council on Cabinet decisions. I call upon Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. Gives me great pleasure to be able to present this report to the Leader of the Council, which represents decisions taken at Cabinet on the 23rd of June and Cabinet member decisions. I'll take them item by item as normal, Chair. Item number 1 is the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy 2025 to 2030.
Thank you, Chair. Two points on this. I'll take them separately, I think, if I may. On 1.1, I would like to commend the Cabinet for finally approving quite a radical housing and homelessness strategy, one that contains an important part of Labour policy, which Councillor Woodward and myself introduced. And I'd like to ask the Leader why that wasn't properly recognised at Cabinet, that this was a proposal, the £2 million spend on social housing was a proposal from Councillor Woodward and myself. It's not been recognised as such, and I think it should have been. It wasn't an original medium-term financial strategy, but only added after we introduced it. But I'd like to commend the policy and ask that thank them for taking aboard the comments made at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On a similar vein to what Councillor Spall's spoken about, but I just want the report that went to Cabinet does highlight the real challenges of housing in our district. And just to pull out a few of the stats so that it's front and centre, 2,200 households in our district are living in unsuitable accommodation. In the last 12 months, the housing register for those qualifying for a social and affordable housing went up by 14% in 1 year. That's 591 individuals. And a lot of people rent, and the average monthly rent in our district is now £962 a month, went up. That's from 23 to 24. And the council has an important role in alleviating the pressures, and the policy strategy talks to that, promoting social housing, shared ownership, and also by attracting, this is an important point, more housing associations into our district to help with delivery of social and affordable housing. And as Councillor Ball referred to, when the MTFS was set in February this year, some important measures were put in place to assist. And would the Leader agree that the council has to continue to do more in this regard? And would he agree in principle that when we set the MTFS going forward and in February, we should look to include more financial support to help in this strict policy area?
Perhaps if I could answer a couple of the questions just so I don't run out. But if you want to add another one.
Chair, thank you. I wanted to speak before Councillor Pullen responds. If I may, through you, Chair, remind Councillor Ray that the Housing and Homelessness Strategy was considered by Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which went into a great deal of detail and highlighted some of those very issues, particularly those levels of housing need. So while people might say, I oppose this particular development or that particular development, we've got to take a far more strategic view and understand the disadvantages that not having a family home creates for families across this district, over 2,000 of them. But hopefully Councillor Ray will be at the next Overview and Scrutiny Committee to make the points there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see this is welcomed across the chamber. I think I should speak on this as well, as it's a really important piece of work. I'm pleased to hear the facts that Councillor Ray came out with earlier. Lack of affordable housing and homelessness, both hidden and on the streets, is a growing issue in our district. As of today, there are 428 individuals and families with an open homelessness case. We've got 629 people waiting on our housing register for an affordable social rented home. some having waited months, particularly those wanting larger homes. And we also have 46 people living in emergency or temporary B&B accommodation just tonight. So tackling these issues is something we as a council are very passionate about, which is why I was delighted to bring this housing, homelessness and rough sleeping strategy to Cabinet. This strategy reflects the views and input of hundreds of people across our communities, not least of all delivering at least 200 new council homes. The strategy includes 3 key aims: preventing homelessness and eradicating rough sleeping, delivering more affordable and social homes, and ensuring people have access to better quality local homes. I want to thank the officers for their extremely hard work in this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take each point in turn, or try and sum up as best I can. Councillor Ball's point about it being a Labour policy. They say that success has 1,000 fathers and failure is an orphan. This is an absolute success, and I think cross-party working across this chamber has contributed to this excellent piece of work that has come forward with input from people right across this chamber. I think it would be remiss not to note, Councillor Ball, your particular personal interest in this, as well as your groups, as well as Liberal Democrats, as well as Independents, and the Conservative group, of course. It would also be remiss of me not to point out that the policy of Lichfield District Council acquiring properties to then provide to others was a policy that predates this council and was actually in place well before 2023. So I think for you to say that is purely a Labour policy, I think we'll be stretching it slightly, but fully understand that that particular pot of 2 million that is still being worked upon and isn't quite agreed yet in terms of the finances was absolutely something that you'd put forward. Councillor Ray, do we need to do more? Absolutely. Of course, of course we always need to do more. Like while there are, and actually I'd say as a council, we don't struggle with the levels of rough sleeping that perhaps some other councils struggle with. We actually don't even struggle with the same levels of temporary accommodation need that a lot of our neighbours struggle with as well. However, whilst there is one person who's sofa surfing or one person who's sleeping rough, or there's a family that's having to live in a bed and breakfast that's outside of this district, absolutely there's always to do more. And I think this is a wonderful step forward in the right direction, and fully welcome the fact that people from right across this chamber have had input into that policy. I think that probably sums it up. But
thank you, Chair. I did say I had 2 points, one on 1.1 and the second one now on 1.2. I'm glad that Councillor Pullen has recognised that the initiative to spend the £2 million did in fact come from the Labour group. He might also be nice enough to recognise it was only after severe campaigning by me and others during since I was elected in 2018 to have more focus on housing that the idea to buy properties to house people was started prior to 2023, as he rightly says. But on 1.2, I'm sure he'll agree, I hope he will, and Councillor Farrell will. I met with the officers on Monday afternoon with Councillor Farrell's agreement, and I've asked them to put the draft comprehensive delivery plan before the ONS committee before it goes to Councillor Farrell for his cabinet member decision, so that we can have an inclusive debate and make sure it's a robust and fully deliverable programme. And I'm also going to meet with those same officers on a bi-monthly basis for the future, so that I'll continue to keep tabs on this and make sure that actually happens in reality. Thank you.
Got to be honest, I missed the question there, Councillor Ball. Could you repeat what the question was?
I was hoping you'd agree that what I just said.
Partially. Thank you, Chair. Number 2, community asset transfer, consideration of approach and process.
Thank you, Chair. As the Cabinet paper from June notes, the primary goal of the community asset transfer is to empower local communities and enable them to manage local assets in a way that best serves the needs and interests of the local area. Core principle is that the local organisation, the clubs and the voluntary groups on the ground possess unique knowledge, passion and motivation to do what's best for our residents. To honour this, it's vital that we adopt a process that is open, fair and transparent. The policy paper itself states that a transfer process can be triggered by an approach from a community or voluntary and community organisation. This implies an open invitation. I believe the most effective and democratic process to invite expression of interest from all eligible community organisations, proactively choosing which groups to approach, as was suggested at Cabinet last month, risk undermining the very spirit of this policy. It could be perceived as a council picking winners and might exclude smaller, newer or less known groups. An open call ensures we capture the widest range of innovative community-led solutions. Finally, to ensure all members can effectively support and champion this initiative in their words, could I ask that a comprehensive list of all council assets potentially available for transfer be compiled and shared with all councillors as soon as possible? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think in terms of making sure that smaller and lesser known groups are able to engage even more fully, quite often, as we discovered through COVID, they were the ones actually who stepped up and were able to make a bigger difference. I'd fully agree there. In terms of providing a list of assets that are potentially up for discussion, I think that would be very challenging, and I would also defend the comment about proactively approaching the most appropriate groups to look after assets. We've got to be pragmatic about this. We've got an incredibly narrow window. I hate to go there, but I will. This Labour government is riding roughshod over local democracy in terms of local government reorganisation. They have made it very clear to us that this council will not have a final say over the future of democracy in our local area. They've made it very clear that residents won't have a say over that either, that it is purely a ministerial decision, and they are moving at a pace which is entirely unsustainable. We have been backed into a corner here as a council to make sure that we safeguard the future of those assets. I won't make any apologies for doing it as quickly and swiftly as we possibly can. If we had longer, then absolutely, perhaps we would open it up to a far more thoughtful and longer approach. We've got perhaps 12 months at most. I think that's an incredibly narrow window. I wish we weren't in this position. We are, and I think we need to do all we can to make the absolute best of it.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. So talking to this item, but just before that, just in response to Councillor Woodward's comment about me at the last on the last item, I'm a regular attender at an ONS. The reason I wasn't at the last one is because my father had to go to hospital that very afternoon. So, but with the community asset transfer, we as a group see this as a sensible policy. We support it. It can help preserve important community assets for future generations, our parks, football pitches, bowling greens. But what I would urge that it does need careful scrutiny, and I ask the leader that as many of these assets, as they're so important to our community, how would he propose that the actual transfers are approved? It seems to me the mechanism is that they need to come to full council for approval because they are so crucial to our community.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Ray, for your supportive comments. I would entirely agree that there needs to be an absolutely transparent process around this. It would seem logical that any transfer of assets would need to come to full council because they're likely to exceed the key decision limit in terms of their value. And I think if they are less than the key decision value, then we probably wouldn't want to be discussing them as asset transfers in the first place, because what we don't want to do is end up having discussions about 50 grass verges for the next 12 months. We really want to make sure that we're thinking about the key assets. They are highly likely to be in excess of the key decision limit, and I'd absolutely expect them to come to full council for approval, as well as complying with the legal requirements of which we are all very well acquainted under the Local Government Act section 123.
Councillor Ashton.
Basically, I agree with what has been said so far by Councillors Taylor, Ray and Councillor Pullen. The problem is that this is going to come upon us sooner than we like. We have got the principles agreed of community assets being transferred. We now need to engage the other stakeholders in this, by which I mean the parish councils, the voluntary organisations, and any trusts which may or may need to be set up, may or may not need to be set up. And this should be done as swiftly as possible. We need as much time as possible to do the due diligence on all of this. And as Councillor Ray has said, we need it to be transparent. Otherwise, we are going to find ourselves accused, rightly or wrongly, of favouritism when there is no need for that accusation. Thank you.
Councillor Pullen.
Councillor Ashton, I entirely agree with you. I think we need to have as much of a runway into this as possible. I understand that we'll be writing this week, if not next, out to those organisations to start inviting them to have conversations with us. But yeah, entirely agree. Thank you.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 3, 2024-2025 Performance Report and Lichfield District 2050 Year 2 Delivery Plan.
Yes, I'd just like to, in that delivery plan, one of the items is which is a very important point, links into the housing challenges we face, is engagement with the owners of the empty properties that have been vacant for the longest period. And there's a report being prepared on replies, barriers, support. I think it's due to be delivered by the end of this quarter, the end of this month. Could the chair, to the leader, sort of confirm that that's on track? It's an important report so that we can take this strategy forward. Thank you.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ray, I would be lying if I know exactly what the answer to that is. Let me take that away as an action and get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
The strategy and the KPIs are fit for purpose. To get too enthusiastic.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, both the 2020-50 strategy, I believe, is important. It is fit for purpose. Of course, Lichfield District Council is unlikely to exist beyond 2028. However, I'd say two things on that. One, we still want to make progress towards that vision in the last 2 years of this council, but also I think it can serve as a blueprint to whatever future organisation comes forward, that actually that vision for Lichfield should be deeply embedded within that organisation as well, to make sure that that vision that had thousands upon thousands of resident responses to actually may help be delivered and deliver against their vision. That's not just the vision of this council, of course. It was thousands of residents that fed into that, and we pulled that together. I would say in terms of delivery, in the last 4 years, this council has delivered a heck of a lot. And whilst sometimes it is important, I think, to help set a vision to start actually moving, you're right, sometimes we just need to crack on and get stuff done. And actually, in the last 3 or 4 years, in terms of the leisure centre and the cinema and the greenway and the design codes and the acquisition of properties and the turning of the council house into a business hub, all of these things have been happening. We've been delivering on the ground, far more so perhaps than in many previous years. So whilst I do understand some hesitance around lots and lots of visions, actually we're delivering as well, and I think having both of those together is the way that we can stand ourselves in best stead for the future. And in 2050, some of us will be around, some of us won't, but I think many of us have actually got into this game of local politics not to make the area better for ourselves, but to make it better for our children and our grandchildren as well, and I very much hope that that vision will help see that come to reality.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. Number 4, adoption of a greenway from Lichfield to Chasewater. Number 5, money matters.
Councillor Bragger.
Thank you, Chair. While I'm pleased to see in this that the track and the ballast will be removed as part of the public liability insurance, I'm concerned about the liability that the council taken on, as described in the cabinet report of the 23rd of June. I'm a bit confused about this one, where it says the third bullet point of 4.2. Does that mean that it should be that the actions from 2.1? Because I don't think there are any recommendations from 1.1. I don't know whether that's a mistake. Going on, I'd like you to assure us that if there's any self-insurance risk or very high annual structural insurance premiums, that comes back to the council for us to judge whether it's in the interests of the residents. I'm a bit confused with the perhaps the wording of the delegation. Clearly, if it's all very simple, then yes, it should be delegated to the cabinet member to sign. But actually, it isn't clear what the threshold is for it to come back to council. So could you assure us that if there is self-insurance or high premiums, it will come back?
Thanks, Councillor Bragger. And I think the greenway is something that many of us in this chamber have spoken about for a number of years now, and it's really quite exciting to see the work that Back the Track have done on that track, and Quattro as well, in terms of clearing the rails, clearing the ballast, clearing all the vegetation off that. And as I've said multiple times in multiple different places, it's slightly embarrassing, I think, as an organisation that a group of volunteer retirees and the main part have managed to clear several miles of track before we've managed to complete some paperwork. I slightly underestimate the paperwork that needs completing there, and officers have done a fantastic job in terms of doing that. And the reality is that the legalities of it have been very complex, and perhaps more complex than we initially thought. In terms of the threshold for bringing it back to council, it's not a threshold of complexity; it's a financial threshold. So if that exceeds £150,000, that becomes a key decision that will come back to council. If it's less than that number, it will be to the cabinet member to make that decision, as it would be with any other decision that they make. So if it exceeds that, it will come back to council. If it doesn't, it'll be made by the cabinet member. But I know that we still continue to engage with both of our insurers and some specialist advisors to determine exactly what our exposure is and what our existing coverage as well. And we're stepping through it very, very carefully, aided by some very capable officers, making sure that we're not making any risky decisions.
Councillor Henshaw.
I'd just like to support Councillor Bragger's remarks about the inherent risk that the council is taking on what is a crumbling asset that is 160 years old. And I'd also like to express my own unhappiness that the approach Network Rail has taken to this district council. They are, after all, a public body, and they seem to have treated us with disdain. To be told that we're being presented with a take it or leave it lease sounds to me quite incredible for a public body. As I stated in my declaration of interest, I'm chair of a body which envisages the old rail line from Walsall through Brown Hills to Lichfield could and hopefully will be restored in the medium to long term as part of a greater West Midlands metro system. And I would hate to see anything done to the line of track that might prevent that. Thank you.
Sir Pullen.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Henshaw, for your comments. And I know we've spoken several times about this. I note, Councillor Henshaw, that you note your interest in Lichfield Rail Promotion Group. Chair, I don't think that interest was necessary to be declared because, of course, actually the work that's being undertaken on the Greenway won't preclude any future rail provision on that line. The tracks themselves are, I think the technical term is knackered, and couldn't be used and have had to be lifted up. But of course, if funding were to come forward, and perhaps it might come through from a strategic transport authority in the future, the work that Back the Track are doing is specifically designed to ensure that if that funding were to come forward at some point in the future, it wouldn't preclude that work from taking place. So I understand your concerns. I also understand your concerns about the inherent risk. And as I said earlier on in my response to Councillor Braga, we're working incredibly closely with our insurers, Zurich Municipal, as well as several specialist advisors to make sure that any risk to this council is properly covered through our insurance policies.
Councillor Mears.
Good evening. Can you hear me clearly? That's great, thank you. I'd like to put two questions to the Cabinet in regard to adoption of the Greenway. The first question is the Cabinet aware of the proposed battery storage site on a 3-acre plot which is adjacent to the Greenway? And the second question is, could the Cabinet come back to full council to give us an understanding of the financial implications regarding the insurance if that application is given the go-ahead, and what risk this would bring to the council and what money would need to be put forward by the council if insurance can't be obtained? Thank you.
Councillor Pullen.
Yes, very quickly, Chair. Yes, we're aware of the energy storage planning application, which was deferred at planning. I think that there's not a huge amount that will, in terms of the Greenway, it's a separate matter. I think whilst it's very important to residents in Hamwich, it is a separate matter from this. Secondly, in terms of the financial risk or the financial implications for full council, as in response to both Councillor Braga and Councillor Henshaw earlier on, if it exceeds £150,000, it will come back to full council. If it's less than £150,000, that is a cabinet member decision for the relevant cabinet member to make in accordance with our constitution.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Pullen's already made reference to Back the Track, but I think we as a council owe them a great deal of gratitude for the work that they've done. They're all volunteers. They live mainly outside this district and we've relied very heavily on their good offices, so I'm sure council will agree. One thing that we ought to clarify in terms of this report, and it came up at the cabinet meeting, it was in response to questions particularly from Councillor Strachan. Each bullet point on these decisions is sequential. So none of the decisions towards the end of the report will take place before the others' actions are taken. So I think that needs to be minuted so that we're all aware of actually the sequence of these actions. Can I also just make a plea, please? That originally the whole idea of the Greenway was to link Burntwood with Lichfield, Lichfield with Burntwood. At present, the Greenway stops before Chasewater, and there'll be a reliance on the council the canal towpaths to bring walkers and cyclists into Chasewater, and that still doesn't bring them directly into Burntwood. So as a further phase of this project, which I know is very dear to the heart of the leader, can we consider those actions that will further enable cyclists and walkers to go from Lichfield into Burntwood and from Burntwood into Lichfield? Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair, and entirely agree with Councillor Woodward on that. I think the important part of this project for me was not trying to come up with the all singing, all dancing solution at great expense on day one, but take it in steps further and further towards what the end goal would be. And I fully welcome us exploring further how we might increase connectivity between Burntwood, Conurbation and the Greenway.
Councillor Pullen.
That's me. Thank you, Chair. Number 5, Money Matters 2024-2025. Number 6, medium-term financial strategy, revenue and capital. This item, that item, Chair, is as a standalone item later on in the agenda. So perhaps if there are any questions, people will be happy for me to deal with it at that point. Number 7, procurement matters 2024-2025. This one.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to draw the council's attention to a concerning figure from the procurement matters report to Cabinet. In the last financial year, our spending with businesses in the Lichfield district fell to just 3%. This is a stark drop from over 16% prior. We're missing a huge opportunity to support our own local economy, create local jobs and build resilience here at home. Our local businesses are the lifeblood of our communities, and a 3% spend does not reflect a commitment to helping them thrive. The council's report attributes this decline to, quote, a shift in procurement activity. We must shift that activity back. The Procurement Act of 2023, which comes into force in a few months, gives us the framework to do exactly that. It explicitly requires disaggregation, the breaking down of large contracts into smaller contracts to help local businesses compete and tender. What steps has the procurement team taken to implement this strategy, and what contracts have been disaggregated to improve this spend figure? The National Procurement Strategy emphasises fostering relationships with local businesses beyond simply publishing opportunities. What proactive outreach has the council undertaken to engage with local business community? Have we held supplier events or offered training to help vendors navigate the complexities of government procurement? This isn't just about a compliance, it's about using our purchasing power as a strategic tool for good, something our own procurement strategy aspires to. It's clear that our current approach isn't working, so what immediate, tangible actions will the Cabinet commit to reverse this trend? Thank you.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Taylor, for the question. Firstly, I'd like to note it's wonderful to hear Councillor Taylor espousing Conservative policy from 2023 and the Procurement Act. So very good to hear that cross-party work from Councillor Taylor. I think, Chair, there are lies, damn lies and statistics. And unfortunately, I think the statistics of our procurement for Lichfield District is unfortunately clouded with several large projects. So projects such as the demolition of the multi-storey, the leisure centre, the cinema, for instance. The way that we measure that at the moment is where the main contractor is based. If they're based outside of the district, but then subcontract to an organisation within the district, we don't capture that within those statistics, and that's something for us to improve on, because it absolutely should do. I'm confident that we are doing far more now than we were last year, than we were doing the year before, in terms of promoting opportunities to local suppliers, for instance, making sure that all of them are advertised, or as many as possible are advertised on to local businesses, and doing far more through our procurement team to, as you quite rightly say, Councillor Taylor, to use our purchasing power to enhance the district. Unfortunately, sometimes when we buy or when we procure large or significant items or significant sort of specialist items where there is not a supplier within the district, clearly that ties our hands slightly. In terms of concrete actions, Councillor Taylor, I will get back to you in terms of exactly what we're going to do on that. I entirely agree with the premise of that act. We absolutely should be breaking up large contracts. We should be giving it to smaller businesses. We should be giving it to SMEs. We should be making sure that we've got as tight a connection with our local economy as we possibly can. I'm really happy that our procurement team are taking great steps towards that. In terms of concrete steps, let me write back to you in terms of what those will be, the practical actions that are going to bring those principles to life.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet member decisions. Number 8, purchasing Microsoft licenses contract award. Unfortunately, they weren't based in Lichfield District, Paul, as much as I'd have liked them to be. Number 9, allocation of Section 106 financial contributions, the Coventry Canal improvements. Number 10, the Statement of Community Involvement 2025. Number 11, the Food Waste Procurement Waste Receptacles. Number 12, Charitable Collections Policy. Chair, that ends my report. Thank you.
If we move on to item 6, minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, can I call on Councillor Norman?
Thank you, Chair. I move the proceedings of the meeting held on the 5th of June 2025 be received.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Lung.
Yes, Chair, I second the minutes.
Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Present, go through the items. Present, 1, apologies for absence. 2, declarations of interests. 3, minutes of the previous meetings. 4, health matters. 5 is the report of the chair of the Cabinet's Critical Friend Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak on minute 55 on the minutes of the previous meeting, because I want to endorse what is stated here, that all councillors should be consulted regarding play streets in their wards. And I say this because we were contacted by some very upset residents who had been contacted by officers unbeknown to us, and because of a possible use of their street as a play street, which was totally unacceptable, because it's a long, straight, busy thoroughfare, which would have been totally unacceptable. And it would have been dangerous as well, because the speed of some of the traffic that uses that road is over the limit sometimes. I'm pleased to say this has now been withdrawn, but it would have taken an awful lot of officers' time.
Sorry, point of order. I thought this was about the accuracy of the minutes. I appreciate what Councillor Evans is saying, but aren't we just talking about how accurate these minutes were as opposed to espousing comments on it?
Yes. If a point of order is called, it can't be to express a personal view. It has to be that what I will refer to.
Chair, it's not to approve the accuracy of the minutes. It's to members may ask questions on the minutes of the chair.
So your point of order cannot be accepted.
Agreed. I look forward to the question.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that, but I just wanted to stress that in order not to waste officers' time, that we as councillors are consulted initially.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. I note the comments made and also the actions that have been taken since that. So I think things are working okay eventually. Item 4, say with health matters, including the lack of progress on the Burwood Health Centre from the task groups there. 5 is the housing and homelessness strategy. And I can't believe he's put his hand up.
Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. If the Chair of Review Scrutiny remembers that we did agree that I would ask something about this at the meeting last week. Anyway, moving on. But will the Chair, like me, welcome the fact that the housing and homelessness strategy now includes a very clear reference to social homes, which we requested, and will they also welcome the fact that I met with officers on Monday this week to talk through how we can get councillor walkabouts moving again, which is something that I think particularly in Buntwood we need to have, and I've agreed with the officers that they will liaise with Bromford and target the areas where the biggest concentrations of Bromford homes are, so that councillors can be invited to go walk about and make sure that they get the work done properly on time. Thank you.
Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I certainly welcome the comments there. And as members can see, there were some good questions there and responses and actions that followed on from that. And that was, I thought, some good scrutiny. I feel a little sympathy for the officers who have to meet Colin on a regular basis now. But of course, he's doing his job as an elected member, and I support him in that. I couldn't say anything else, could I? So, but yes, I welcome those comments. I think we all do, and I think the leader sort of suggested that at the beginning. I didn't give scrutiny that much credit when he was doing that, but never mind. Item 6, Chair, is the planning performance progress. I look forward to the latest quarter, by the way, on for the just to see how progress is being made, because it's hard to compare them to the family of councils that we've got to get the latest information. And I think that's it, except for the work programme. Just to mention that we now have we're setting up now the public transport task group with the members who are volunteered, and nobody's forced to be on this task group. There's Councillor Rushton, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Henshaw, and me. So there's just the 4 there, but that's all we could manage. And on the work programme, we've got also the report,
Councillor Norman.
the executive committee, the report of the health task group, which I hope people will look at.
We have a question from Councillor Ray.
Yeah, actually, it was what you're referring to, Councillor Norman. It's not a question. It's just a thank you, really, for setting up that task group, because I know that was discussed at the meeting, and then you've made that decision further. In particular, bus services are substandard in our area and not reliable enough. Something I've long championed, and particularly important considering the two-centre nature of our district and the rural makeup. So I just want to thank. I know the task group will also look at.
Point of order. Is there a question here, please, Chair?
Yeah, just good. So I know, yes, I know that the task group will also look at train transport issues. And I just want to thank the Chair, and will acknowledge that that is going to make a really important change of direction for the transport issues in our district.
Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the power of scrutiny has actually come up with evidence, and that's why you have witnesses giving evidence. You look at the research and the facts, and the party politics has a little bit more, has a little difficulty with that sometimes, because sometimes the evidence and the information that you get contradicts that which you actually believe. So I do hope that we do get some good reports out of the task group, which I should be a member of. And make some progress on that, because public transport is an issue that's been neglected in the past, I think, and there may be some progress coming now from elsewhere. I will remember next time that Councillor Pullen is being thanked. I'll have to interrupt him, as Councillor Fowles interrupted that thank you to me, but that's just being vindictive, I know.
Moving on, item 7, minutes of the Employment Committee. Can I call on Councillor Wilcox?
Thank you, Chair. I move that the proceedings of the Employment Committee meeting held on the 26th of June 2025 be received and where necessary approved and adopted.
Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Chairman, I second the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Apologies for our absence. Declaration of interest. Minutes of the previous meeting. Gender pay gap. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to change what I have written as a comment to stop Councillor Farrell getting up. So I'm just I think my question is that would it be perhaps useful to look at the gendered nature of the council staff in a slightly broader way? And my comment to support that question is that it's obviously pleasing to see a gender pay gap going, you know, in the right direction if it's not going to be zero. But there's always the anxiety that a gender pay gap reflects a small number of women in higher positions rather than the general average. However, and I'm pleased to see that it was senior women officers who presented this very interesting paper to the committee. In fact, if one looked at the median, what the average wage is for men and women on the staff, it is actually zero rather than, so it's entirely perfect. But the point I wanted to ask about is that there were 306 staff in the calculation, 252 full-time, and almost 2/3 of those 252 are men. And I just wonder whether, as well as the gender pay gap, another question, that it's worth the council having a look, as is implied by some of the minutes actually, at a more representative, whether it needs to work to have a more representative gender balance across the board in council employees.
Can we take the minutes as received and adopted? Yes. Right. 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 Moving on to.
Chair, point of order. Point of order, Chair.
Yeah.
When a member asks a question, it's up to the chair of that committee or who's presented the minutes to give a response.
Yes, I did. Sort of didn't see any suggestion that Councillor Wilcox wanted to respond, so I apologise. So Councillor Wilcox, if you would like to respond.
Yeah, so I'll take that back to the ladies that presented that paper. Come back to you.
Right, so can we take the minutes as received and adopted?
Thank you, Chair. I move that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 2nd of June 2025 be approved and adopted.
Councillor Ashton. Thank you, Councillor. Apologies for absence. Declaration of interest. Minutes of the previous meeting. Verbal update on taxi enforcement activity. Right? Page
31. Just take it by page.
My apologies, I turned 2 pages. Takes a bit of getting used to. Right, I'll start again. Right.
Just take this page.
Planning application, page 31.
31, correct. Page 30.
Councillor Checkland doesn't, no questions, so. No, all right. Having turned 2 pages, I apologise. So, minutes of the Regulatory and Licensing Committee.
Chair, any minutes as received and
Oh,
adopted.
right. Turning 2 pages, I lost.
Point of order, Chair. I don't think we've accepted the minutes of the planning committee yet.
Yes, yes, I'm just going to. Can we take the minutes as received and adopted? Thank you. I will now move on then to item 9. Minutes of the Regulatory and Licensing Committee. Can I call on Councillor Mears?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tom.
I move that the proceedings of the Regulatory and Licensing Committee meeting held on the 19th of June 2025 be received and, where necessary, approved and adopted.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Thank you. We'll take the item minutes by item number. So item number 1, apologies for absence. Declaration of interest. Minutes of the previous meeting. Verbal update on taxi enforcement. Food Safety Service Delivery Plan 24-25 performance review.
Councillor Norman.
Councillor Norman.
The first item, you didn't look at me when you were saying it, Chair. Just make some comments, no question. I can make it a question at the end, but it's really just some comments on the report on the food safety, as we're allowed to do under the regulations. On the food standards report there, the first bullet point is members asked about publicising the positive statistics regarding food hygiene. I'm glad to see that we are doing that, and I do see those, and I do republicise them myself. I think it's good that we have that progress, and the more publicity there is, the more, hopefully, more likely it is that other establishments will want to improve as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. It says members discussed the display of food hygiene ratings, and as we know, if you've got a low hygiene rating, you tend not to put that on your front door. In fact, you hide those away. The only ones you ever see around. Sometimes it's 4, but nearly always it's a 5. All the rest are not displayed. Now in Wales, as we know. We should know, perhaps because the previous MP used to on about it forever, mainly because he gives on electoral register in Wales as well as in Litchfield District, that they're obliged to put them on the front doors or their windows and prominent display. So I thought I was going to go through the Wales ones. I didn't get very far. I went through Conwy, and I couldn't believe that there were 10 premises with only a 1-star hygiene rating. So I'm going to get on Google Drive and see if they've got them on the windows as they go by. But if we could have on display, that would be a great thing, but that's a matter for national government, and hope we can lobby on that. And the last item there, the last bullet point, was members suggested adding a link on the District Council's website to the National Food Hygiene Ratings page. Well, mine is a link that's always there on my phone, on my other tablets and so on. But we did used to have that for Staffordshire. We had all the districts in Staffordshire for food hygiene ratings. You could have a look on the website, and that was taken off some time ago. I forget what the reasons were. I wasn't involved in it, but it was a shame that that wasn't on there for local residents. Whether that could come back is unlikely with the local review. But that was a good thing there. But certainly I would always recommend people educate themselves through the food hygiene ratings that any establishment has got. And I appreciate the report there. And so there was no question for the chair unless she says, I agree, maybe.
Councillor Mears, do you wish to respond?
Thank you. No, I agree with the sentiments from Councillor Norman that it would be a progressive step forwards if it was more enforced that they had to display the food rating, because I do think that's in everybody's benefits. Thank you.
Can we take the minutes as received and adopted? All in favour? Yes. So what's the problem? So number item 6, charitable collections. Item 6, charitable collections. I just finished. Right. Charitable collections policy. Item 7, work programme. Can we take the minutes as received and adopted? Thank goodness for that. Item 10, membership of Cabinet, Shadow Cabinet and committees. Can I call upon the Leader of the Council, Councillor Pullen?
Yes. Find ourselves in a slightly bizarre situation this evening, Chair, where I am recommending to full council that some changes entirely to the Labour group are approved by full council. And I would like to take this point to welcome Councillor Andrew Rushton to the Shadow Cabinet. Congratulations, Councillor Rushton. I'm sure you do a fantastic job. And we're very glad to see what you achieve as part of this apparent new coalition.
Councillor Woodward.
Thanks, Chair. Can I second Councillor Pullen's recommendations, but also make a point that on the Shadow Cabinet changes, there's one significant omission, and that's of Councillor Sharon Benevicius, who's the Shadow Cabinet member for community engagement. She was on the list that I had submitted, but through some sort of glitch, she's been missed off this list. But I'd like to welcome Sharon to the Shadow Cabinet, but also Councillor Rushton has been mentioned, Councillor Harvey Coggins and Councillor Paul Taylor, who was previously, of course, a Shadow Cabinet member and then did a great deal of credit for himself as the former chair of the Audit Committee. But I'll move those subject to that addition, please, Chair. Thank you. I'll second that.
Chair, forgive me, I need to move a slightly different part as well then to agree as part of those recommendations that the constitution be amended to reflect any of those changes made as well, just for accuracy. Thank you, Chair. With the amendment that Councillor Benevicius is included on that as well, of course.
We'll now take a vote on the proposal, the list of appointments to committees and proposal D to agree that the constitution be amended to reflect any changes. All those in favour? Unanimous. We'll take that in as being unanimous. So it's passed.
We've got the consent meeting.
Moving on to item 11. Statement of community involvement. Can I call on Councillor Farrell to speak on this item?
You can. Thank you, Chair. This statement of community involvement sets out how we will involve and engage with our local communities, businesses and other stakeholders when developing planning policy documents and determining planning applications. We are required by law to review it every 5 years, and as our last one was published in August 2020, we need to publish a new one this summer. The draft statement was presented to ONS on the 28th of January this year for their comments. The feedback provided during the meeting was considered and changes were made to the draft document as a result. We then held a formal 6-week public consultation between the 7th of March and the 18th of April this year. To advertise this, we contacted all consultees on our planning policy database via email, put it on social media, and a press release went out as well to raise awareness. Officers then reviewed, processed and summarised the responses. A summary of these is in Appendix B of this report, and following the consultation, minor amendments to the document have been made, and it's here tonight in Appendix A for your final approval. So I move the recommendation set out in this report, which is to adopt the final statement of community involvement 2025, and of course, welcome any questions.
Be delighted to second this fantastic piece of work that a cabinet member has done along with his officers, and he has spoken so well to it. There's nothing further I can add, Chair.
All those in favour? Against? Abstentions? I think item 12, medium-term financial strategy. Can I call on? Well, no, we can't, because it's not. So Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. And for anyone who was looking forward to this paper being delivered in Councillor Strachan's usual brilliant oratory, I apologise in advance. You have the Timu version of Councillor Strachan this evening. I'll do it a lot quicker. Councillor, it brings me great pleasure to be able to bring this paper. It reflects an update to the medium-term financial strategy. It was touched on in the Cabinet or the Leaders' Report earlier on, rather. There are 4 main updates, and those are that we increase the revenue budget for local government reorganisation from £10,000 to £40,000. That we increase the disabled facilities grant capital budget for 25-26 by £497,000. That's going up from 879 to 1.3 million. To approve the addition of a new project of £120,000, and that's to create some small scale grants for micro and small rural businesses via the Rural Shared Prosperity Grant. And finally, to approve a revenue budget of £600,000 for 8 new apprentices, funded entirely by the collection fund surplus in 24-25 and a small amount of general reserves as well. I hope that Council could agree with me in its entirety that actually, well, most of these, except maybe the first one, are all good things, that we are able to commit greater budget to disabled facilities grant through LWMTS. We are now actually able to get that money out of the door and into people's homes where it does make a difference. And I know many councillors from across the chamber have championed that for many months and indeed many years. Also, in terms of creating the small grants pot for micro and small rural businesses, I know Councillor Taylor spoke very passionately early on about how we provide support for those small businesses, and perhaps this is one of the ways that we can do that. And finally, that approving a revenue budget of £600,000 for 8 new apprentices. Chair, that gives me so much pleasure to be able to do that. I think everyone will notice the difference, both in terms of capability and culture that our apprentices have brought to this council over the last few years. We've seen some fantastic apprentices come through this organisation, not only helping give them a step up in the early days of their career, but genuinely also making a difference within the culture of this organisation and onto our residents as well. Those are the recommendations, Chair. I will present them to Council.
Yes, Chairman, I second the proposal and reserve the right to speak later if necessary.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, I'm going to I appreciate Councillor Pullen isn't Councillor Strachan, so I'm going to test his knowledge of the numbers. But firstly, with the last item of the recommendations about the apprenticeship, apprentices fully endorse that. That is something we've spoken before about in this chamber. About we're a significant employer in this district, and it's important that we have a good quota of apprentices. With the I'd just like to understand the number, the 600,000, and how that's funded, because there is the apprenticeship levy, which the council pays and then presumably then gets a refund. Yeah, it's just really tried to understand that. But the main thing is to endorse the fact that the progress the council is making with regards to hiring apprentices, but I'd like to understand the background to that number.
Councillor Ray, I'm being told by my able assistants here that the apprenticeship levy actually only funds about 5% of that, so the rest is obviously coming from other sources. So if you remember previously, we used to pay the levy as we are mandated to do, but actually we didn't take up any of those apprentices. It was a great source of concern to me that was not taken up at the time, and I'm pleased to say that our current chief executive has wholeheartedly embraced that drive and has brought them on board. Thank you, Councillor Ray.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, when this was presented to Cabinet last month, it was heartening to hear Councillor Strachan talk about the collegial approach that he takes to this, and that he would be consulting with the other side of the benches during this process. It would be helpful to know where in the timetable that will occur, so that we can be prepared. So if in his absence, if the leader could ask him to give us some idea, that'd be grateful. Thank you.
Chair, I would fully expect that to be an ongoing process throughout the consultation period. I will ask Councillor Strachan to reach out directly, though, if dates need to be put in the diary to make sure that it doesn't slip.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this, and I'm sure we'll all get to do the recommendation shortly, but I'm wondering if Councillor Pullen is aware that Edingale Parish Council currently has advertised, as of the 2nd of June, this £120,000 that's been secured for the small businesses, that the capital funding is now already open and expressions of interest enabling small businesses to apply for the grants are already open, yet we have not approved it yet. I'm wondering if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Naughty Edingale. I can't comment on what Edingale Parish Council have done. They're clearly aware of it. I'm glad that it is hopefully going to be recommended, but perhaps they've slightly jumped the gun on that.
All those in favour of the motion? Any against? Abstentions? The motion is approved. Move on to item 13, motion on notice. I understand that a motion has been submitted by Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Chair. The motion on notice is in front of you on your agenda papers as agenda item 13. I'd like to give you my reasons for introducing this motion. Solar panels, or given a more technical name, photovoltaic or PV panels, transform light into electricity. They're a common sight around the country. We're close to a national legislation making them a mandatory feature on new residential builds. That's a Lib Dem initiative, by the way. But until that happens, we should be thinking about how we as a council can kickstart the process and how we can set a good example to commercial companies by using our existing assets. We, Lichfield District Council, we own several car parks. These are prime sites for solar power generation. Roofing open car parks with solar panels is far from being a fantasy. In fact, it is now a legal requirement in France that a new car park with a capacity of 80 cars or more must have solar generating capability included as part of the design. And these solar panels not only provide electricity, but they shield vehicles from extremes of weather. and we've been having a lot of extremes of weather recently, and this will continue. Now, I have been informed that as part of a carbon reduction plan carried out in between 2021 and 2022, this idea was examined, at least in part. However, at that time, there were lower hanging fruit, such as LED lighting, insulation, automatic switches, and so on. These promised a prompter return on investment, and so PV on car parks and other structures took a bit of a back seat. We're 3 or 4 years on from there. The situation has changed. As I mentioned earlier, the use of solar panels may become mandatory in some areas. This will drive down the capital costs associated with such installations. The technology has improved, not just the panels becoming more efficient, but batteries and so on have come on a long way. There's more appetite for such installations, and as a result, there are more external financial incentives available. An alphabet soup of UK SPF, SEG, IETF, zero VAT, and so on. And the climate is changing to more extreme weather, including heat waves and hours of sunshine. And these all make the development of a new large-scale PV installation a much more attractive proposition than it was several years ago. Now, I did some rough estimates of how much electricity would be generated by covering most of Bird Street car park, if it still exists at this time, and the top deck of Lombard Street car park, based on peak output from the PV panels for only 4 hours a day, and a PV efficiency of only 18%. I mean, if your eyes are glazing over now. But I came up with over 850 megawatt hours of electricity per year generated from those figures. 2 car parks. That's a quarter of a small modular nuclear reactor. These are very rough figures. They were produced on the back of a virtual envelope by a non-expert, me. So what I'm requesting in this motion is that the Cabinet commission an expert-led report using some of the work which has been done previously to identify potential council-owned sites for PV installations, and the cost of creating and maintaining these installations, including all the ancillary equipment like inverters, battery storage where necessary. Look at the sources of external funding for such developments, and then try and work out how much and at what, and the value of the electricity that might be generated by such a process. All of this to be achieved in a set timescale rather than some indefinite future date, and reported to full council. Once this is done, we can decide on going ahead with electrifying our council-owned assets, and we make Lichfield a national leader. Make no mistake, if we attempt to do this under the new unitary authority, whatever form that new unitary authority will take, it will take longer and it'll be more complex, even if national legislation compels us to do this. Acting now gives us a head start in the field, and it sets an example not only to other local authorities, but to businesses and enterprises within the district. So I therefore urge all members to support this motion, and if it is passed, for the Cabinet to act swiftly on its recommendations. Thank you.
Seconded. Yeah, the seconder. Do we have a seconder first? Councillor Braga. Thank you, Councillor Braga.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to second this excellent motion, but would like to reserve my right to speak at the end of the debate, if needed.
Councillor Pullen.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Ashton, or Chair, yeah, I agree with much of what Councillor Ashton has put into this motion. I think clearly using our assets to not only provide clean energy, but also do it at a cost or no cost to our residents, and improving some sources of revenue is never going to be a bad thing. And in fact, I think the preamble I can entirely agree with. My only concern with the motion, or one of my concerns with the motion, is the onus it puts on the council to come back by the end of the year 2025, having done quite a substantial piece of work. The 2025 work programme is full. The budget for 2025 and the beginning of 2026 has been allocated, and therefore, purely from a sort of pragmatic perspective, I don't think that I could agree to this motion this evening, or certainly wouldn't be able to support this motion, not because of the necessarily the content of it, but because of the, I think, unachievable onus that it puts on the council to come back with that report. So, Chair, whilst I'm certainly not against the drive and the thrust behind this motion, I am deeply uncomfortable with the requirement to come back to full council by the end of the year.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, Chair, that I'm personally very much in favour of renewable energy systems in general terms, and I often despair during our planning council meetings when there seems to be an apparent lack of forethought in that respect for many of the applications that come before us. However, I do have concerns about this particular presentation, because one of the main conditions imposed within this Labour government's local authority restructuring policy is the restriction on district councils to make significant financial decisions or expenditure prior to the local government reorganisation coming into play. If this council were to support the high cost of the installation of solar panels on the various structures that we have in the city, technically a great idea, but in just a couple of years' time, it must be remembered that these assets could potentially no longer be an asset of a local authority. It could be deemed, therefore, a serious breach of governance, and further could risk sanctions against us under a valid claim of unjustifiable and unnecessary extravagance, citing the action as an effort to deprive the succeeding authority of substantial funds. And that is in the legislation. In my opinion, the money could be better spent at the moment and better used to benefit our residents and communities. This doesn't at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Wallens.
Cheers, thank you, Chair. Just a quick couple of questions. Could the council leader agree that the money that it would take to construct these solar panels and to erect them on car parks and obviously council buildings and so forth could be better spent elsewhere on local residents and businesses? And can you also agree that if such fire did occur, that it'd be more environmental damaging compared to nuclear and fossil fuels? Thank you.
Councillor Lung.
Thanks, Chair. I want to start by saying I support the idea of going green. We have to make sure we do it in the right time and in the right place. As Councillor Salter said, we're expecting a new unitary council in about 2.5 years' time, and that's going to bring in big changes about local government, how local government works. So we don't know what's going to happen to the properties or land owned by Lichfield District Council. They could be repurposed, they could be demolished. The decision may not be ours to make. So that's why we have to ask a really important question. Is it the right time to invest sums of taxpayers' money into the council-owned buildings we might not even own or use in the near future? Or should we prioritize the funds into services and projects which would directly benefit our residents now while we still have the local influence? So this motion would set off a long and expensive process, extensive surveys, who's doing the work, extensive work involved, plus unforeseen circumstances, etc. It will take years. And let's be honest, by the time any actual work starts, the new unitary council may have taken over and made complete different decisions. We must think very carefully before committing to something that could ultimately result in wasted time, effort, and taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sorry to say that Councillor Salter is incorrect. We can spend money if the council so resolves, and therefore Councillor Leung is also incorrect. As far as the report by the end of this year is concerned, we've been told before tonight that we've set ourselves some very tough targets to meet. And my view was that this administration, and supported by other council members, liked the idea of pushing targets forward so that we can more than fulfil our obligations. And I'm sure our shadow cabinet member, Councillor Rushton, will have something to say about that too. Of course, Councillor Pullen could have suggested an amendment to take that target out. I'm pleased to hear that he and others are supportive of the sentiment behind the motion. So why not provide an amendment or propose an amendment to take that particular bullet point out? And it seems to me as though this is finding a way to oppose the whole motion. I certainly support the motion, and can I call for a named vote at the end, Chair, please?
Can I just say lots of hands have gone up and I have a list, so I will take you in order. The next in line was Councillor Norman.
Spend 5 million quid we ain't got on something. So actually the fine for a different game. So yeah, the central thing I have looked at the cabinet member for environmental matters, which is to say May 26th or June 26th or whatever. So yeah, let's just see what happens.
Oh.
Let's get that on.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of points. This is the second time tonight that the leader has suggested we can't do something because it involves a list of our assets by the end of this year. 5.5 months to do a list of assets that either for community asset transfer or that might be suitable for this this work. It's a touch worrying if we can't list our assets out in 5.5 months.
Point of personal explanation, Chair. I have said no such thing at all, and I'd like Councillor Taylor to retract that because it does not accurately reflect my comments.
Told me that you couldn't list the community asset transfer assets by the end of this year. In answer to my point, that, and if that's not roughly the same as what assets do we have that we could put solar panels on, you know, those two questions should be answerable in 5.5 months. With LGR, subject to the laws around us not spending money frivolously, it is incumbent on us at the moment to secure the value of our assets to the best services of our residents, and this is one way that we could do that forwards into the future beyond the end of this council. Thank you.
Councillor Booker.
Thank you, Chair. I know comments from some of the councillors tonight are concerned about whether we will own a car park in a few years' time. Some of us are concerned whether we'll have a planet in a few years' time. And this motion has been put forward to try to address the lack of progress that has been made so far on what has been declared a climate emergency. Can I just seek clarification that Councillor Salter did say, based on this is a climate emergency, this is an unjustifiable extravagance? Did you really say that about trying to address climate change? Thank you.
Councillor Rushton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was really pleased to be speaking on this motion today that's been put forward, but I'm quite disappointed by the lack of ambition by some of our councillors across the chamber today, because if we are hand tied to this LGA reform. We are stuck for multiple years. We've still got years to come. This motion's clear set out. We have a budget in place already for climate change and climate change initiatives, which this can touch into. But it's also important to point out that there's other external funding that we can look into as well, which is what this motion is all about. It is made very clear that this report will look into other external funding from maybe central government or other funding providers as well. So I'm a little bit miffed by the idea that this will all come from just Lichfield District Council, but we do also have a budget in place for that. So I'm really pleased to be voting for this motion today. I hope other councillors do as well, because we made a promise to our residents 6 years ago now, but we will be taking this climate crisis very seriously. And the residents are starting to feel it. Every year in my ward in Elford, we have flooding, which is becoming a common occurrence, and that's only going to get worse as we go forward. So any initiative we can do to help our residents, I think we should be voting for. Thank you.
Councillor Sylvester Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting hearing people's comments, obviously, across the chamber. And in this position, especially, I think it's important that we make sure that we have an accurate reflection of where we're at now. So whilst I think that the motion is laudable, I'm very challenged to be able to see how we can deliver on things that have already been identified. If I can just go through some of the information that I've been able to supply since I've seen this particular motion. First of all, we had just over £1 million allocated to Burntwood Leisure Centre, and that was used to fit solar panels across the building's roof. Also to install air source heat pump, LED lighting inside and outside, and also to replace the air handling unit. So we have undertaken some of that work on the council-owned buildings. And I think that's a really key part to hear, is that as part of what we've been doing as far as the carbon data dashboard information, which is available for all to see on the website, that we have a very good idea of what those assets are. We also instigated a feasibility study that was done by Entrust, and that study was for the redevelopment of both District Council House and the Pavilion. And I appreciate that in the intervening period, there's been a certain amount of uncertainty, which still exists, as to what needed to be done. So those, with regards to that one, so this was in 2020, and I've mentioned about the intervening period and the uncertainty, but to maximise the potential of the buildings and to consider decarbonisation, the options were ranging from amend existing, which I've got a figure for, which I'll mention in a moment, to carbon zero. For the District Council House, the feasibility study provided estimated projected cost of 7.1 million, and for amend existing, and 10.8 million for the carbon zero. So there is information that exists, and I think it is really important that we take opportunity before we go through with actually supporting this motion this evening to establish that information that we already have in the existing here and now. And the other part that I would add to that, which I think is equally important, is the work that we've also set underway with regards to a system of grants to not only support what we've been trying to do here, but also within the business community and especially within the hospitality community to be able to have green endeavours, which is also going to be benefiting them financially too. So in conclusion, I would say there's a lot of work that's already been done, and we need opportunity to make sure that we've got full eyes on all of that information. Thank you.
Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chairman. I couldn't allow this motion to go without saying something, because as soon as I see the words carbon reduction, I'm afraid it makes my hackles rise. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, of course, is a trace element. If you asked 100 people walking down the street, what is the proportion of CO2 in the atmosphere, I guarantee few of them would get it correct. I will tell you, it's 420 parts per million. That's 0.04%. But you hear people talking and you think that it was 10 or 20% of the atmosphere, and it's not. But carbon dioxide is absolutely essential for making plants grow. Without carbon dioxide, we would all cease to exist. There would be no life on Earth. And yet CO2, fossil fuels have been demonized, and we should really appreciate the value of CO2 in the atmosphere. Now, I know that we have a member of this council who belongs to a party which actually opposes carbon net zero. And whilst I'm not a member of that party, I too do oppose carbon net zero. And I don't think we should be spending any money on solar panels at all, especially since we inhabit an area of this planet which is 53 degrees north of the equator. Our sunshine hours during the summer months are fantastic, but during late October, November, December, January, February, they are derisory, and the amount of power that would be produced by solar panels is minimal. I really think it would be a waste of money. And that's not just because I'm a climate heretic, but I'm looking at taxpayers' money that's being spent in Lichfield District by us as a council. And I think we have to be very much more responsible in terms of how that money is spent. So I would oppose this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Ray.
Yes, I'd want to distance myself from what Councillor Marshall says. I'm afraid you're not aligned to the science and you're not aligned to the sentiment and the views of our community and our residents and the population. The motion, it seems to me, is clear, is specific, and it is tackling what this council voted for in 2019 to do what it can to tackle the climate change emergency. I just want to also make a point which Councillor Rushton referred to. When we approved the budget and the MTFS in February, there's a specific budget, £75,000 for each of the next 3 years towards climate change emergency initiatives. So we have, when it comes to some funding to do something specific to make a difference for climate change emergency, we have a budget. It seems to me the key concern is the timing for delivery of this report, and I'm sure this council can do something about, and we can as a body pass this motion and then make the right decision for this council and for our community.
Councillor Anketel.
Thank you, Chair. I'm amazed at Councillor Marshall's seeming ignorance about the effect of carbon dioxide. When scientists first started investigating the change in temperature, they were thinking that the Earth was cooling. And then over the years, they found out that rather than cooling, the Earth was actually warming. And they, over a period of 20 or more years, they found that this warming was associated with an increase in the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. Maybe it's a minute percentage in the atmosphere, but that minute percentage and its increase is increasing global warming. And it'll cost money. I've got solar panels on my roof. I've had it for about 10 or 15 years. It costs money. I've got the money back already. Now, it'll cost us far, far more to deal with the damage caused by the effects of global warming than it is to put into place things that will reduce global warming, like solar panels. The cost will be minute compared with the cost of not doing anything. Just think of what's just happened in America. It's happened all over the place. A few years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, in this country, there were catastrophic floods once or twice or even 3 times a year in this country, sometimes in the same place, involving loss of life as well as loss of property. I think we ought to go ahead with this motion, perhaps a bit at a time, car park by car park or whatever, but we can't afford to do nothing.
Councillor Smith.
Hey, Chair. This motion doesn't actually make us to spend any money at all at the moment. All it asks for is for investigation to be carried out and to come back to the council. It's at that point where we'll be making any commitment to spending money, other than the fact that we'll have officers' time, obviously, to look to investigate. But we're not actually asking people to spend money at the moment. But whatever you might think about climate change, there's no doubt that we are getting warmer. It's not necessarily by humans. Cows do produce a fair amount of the problem, but we're now told we will have our third heat wave of the summer. We normally only get one heat wave every 10 years. And I'm old enough to remember cold winters of 47 and 63. Most of the people in the chamber won't be old enough to even remember a really cold winter. Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I think in principle that there's nothing to argue against, but I just wanted to pick up on, well, two comments now from Councillor Smith. The winter of 63, my grandmother dropped down dead in that particular January the 26th of that winter. Right. And it was very much firmly, although I was born in the September of that year, as through my life, that winter was clearly impressed on me as we lost a very dear person. So I do know about 1963. Regards Councillor Ray, I'm not going to disagree with what he's saying, but in terms of public opinion, we only have to look at what public opinion delivered on the 1st of May of this year. And I'm afraid it didn't deliver what the parties opposite, or even the parties I represented, the result that any of us wanted. So maybe the public are abreast of the situation for plenty of reasons. So we don't own the debate. That's what I'm trying to say. I do recognise there are issues, but I don't think if we looked at what happened on the 1st of May, it was seismic, and it was quite clear their agenda was looked upon as favourable. I don't agree with it, but I think we need to be a little bit acknowledge some things were done as a result, and we have to acknowledge where those concerns are. Now, that takes a broad, brave shoulder to take on board, because quite frankly, you know, we may disagree. In here, we may disagree, but the vast majority thought otherwise the way they voted.
Councillor Ennis, I think.
That's great, thank you. It's lovely to hear by the sound of it, everyone agrees it's a great motion. Everyone on the other opposition has said it's good, it sounds good, and they've raised points trying to find a reason why it isn't good. I think the point that was raised was actually the cost to this council for this to enact this motion is minimal. It's to investigate, it's to look, it's to bring it back and then look at the costs. I think we're in danger as well. We've had a couple of arguments mentioning about the unitary council and about whether we should be spending money. I can put some caution to that. If we're going to use that as an argument, virtually every big project that comes to this council, that argument can be used. So I think we've got to be careful if we are going to use that as an argument, because at this moment in time it isn't one, and we shouldn't use it as a barrier to stop us going forward with projects. It is about being as equal as possible as a council and doing the best that we can do. If someone said to me, do you want solar panels over our car parks, or do you want solar panels over our fields? Well, I'd say put it over our car parks, put it over our buildings. Let's save our fields and let's use those. As a council, should we not be leading by example and saying, OK, if we're going to do renewable energy, let's do renewable energy on our buildings, on our car parks. Let's be market leaders. Let's encourage other big businesses to follow our suit, put it on their roofs, put it on their car parks. And that's what we should be doing. This report that comes back could say exactly that. It could say, actually, we can look at our car parks, but should we as a council be encouraging other businesses to put it on their car parks? And that's what this report could come back and say. I think there's lots that we could do to investigate to make this work. I think let's not look at excuses for this not to go through. Let's actually embrace it. It's going to come back to us anyway. There is very minimal cost to this council. I'm really confused on why this is being debated negatively on one certain side, because I don't think it needs to be. This could have been done 15 minutes ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I do that, is it in order for me to move an amendment in order to get collegiate working and take notice of what's said, to amend this to the last bullet point to say as soon as possible, but by June 2026? And then, of course, Councillor Pullen and people who think this is a very good motion, it's actually answering part of the problem that they're putting forward. So if that's in order, could I move that amendment first and then I will come back and respond?
I shall just take advice there. Could I ask Councillor Ashton if he is happy with that? Yeah, well, we can accept the amendment.
Right, so it's now time for me to respond, or are we voting on the amendment first?
Just
be clear on what the amendment is.
The amendment is the last bullet point, replace the timescale by as soon as possible, but by June 2026.
June.
No later than June.
Yeah. Councillor Norman, do you want to speak?
Well, only say that we've all got to vote on whether we support the amendment or not, but I wouldn't have bothered anyway because it says should in here on the last sentence, but we're leaving that aside. We all have to vote on the amendment, whether the mover proposes it or not. Doug wants to check with me. Come back. Oh, stop there.
It's been proposed that we change the motion. We need the consent of the meeting to agree that. So this isn't the vote on the motion, it's consent to agree the change.
Right. We've had a proposal to amend the motion, so we have to have a vote to see if the councillors we need the consent of the councillors to amend the motion. Yes. Yeah. So all those in favour of amending the motion? All those against amending the motion?
Oh, sorry. Before. Okay. So we will vote.
The motion is carried. 20 voted in favour, 19 against. Amended. Councillor Pullen.
Chair, I'd like to propose an alternative amendment. So I hear cries of charlatans coming from across the chamber, and actually I just don't think that's the case. I think that the reality is that despite a new shadow cabinet member being appointed for this specific remit, a council business is trying to be forced through via motion, and I think that's an unfortunate way of us dealing with substantial matters that I think we've all agreed are important. But you can groan all you like, but it's what's happening. So, Chair, my amendment would be to demonstrate to colleagues from right across the chamber that actually this is something that we're more than happy to look at. If items 2 and 4 were removed from the recommendations, so the amendment would read that Council calls on Cabinet to consider implementing the following. We're happy to make a survey of all the council owned and managed properties. And Councillor Taylor, despite your statements earlier on, will be able to provide a list of assets next week if we needed to. That is not what I said earlier on. We can absolutely provide that list of council owned and managed properties, including buildings and car parks, to determine where it would be possible. I don't think that's too onerous for our officers to achieve. And at number 3, and to Councillor Rushton's point, we'd be more than happy to look at a list of possible sources of external funding. What I wouldn't be happy doing is including item number 2, which actually introduces a significant work stream. It's not about the finances, it's about officer time that's already committed to other activities. We've already talked about creating a small grant scheme to support, in particular, the hospitality industry, which are facing incredible cost rises, not least because of the Chancellor, but also because of the rise in energy costs. And I would not be happy at number 4 to put a timeline on it. So, Chair, my amendment would be to remove items number 2 and 4, and that would be absolutely something that this group would be happy to support. I'll just need a second now.
Count.
First of all, the second.
So where do I go from there?
So Councillor Cox and Councillor Norman want to speak.
Councillor Cox, you want to speak? No.
Second. Okay.
Councillor Norman.
Thanks, Chair. I may have misunderstood what happened earlier. I thought the cabinet member for the environment and climate change and so on said we had this information already anyway. I'm also concerned if you get rid of paragraph 2, it means you haven't got to take the action necessary to give a decent report in May or June, whatever one. I forget which one won. I think we suggested delaying it, and I think the other side wanted it still staying at May. But either way, still staying in 2025. Either way, I thought we had the information already. I thought that's what the cabinet applying, and I also thought that without 2, it's going to be difficult to know what we're going to get in that report. So those are my concerns. Convince me otherwise.
Councillor Ang-Patel.
Point of order.
It's not changing the original motion, that's why we took the first vote. This is an amendment to the original motion. Yes, and now this is an amendment. No, we changed the motion. Oh, no, yeah. And he wants to change the new motion. Okay. Okay.
Councillor Smith.
Idea of what the cost's going to be under item 2. How are we going to make a decision when it comes to the council in 2026 or whenever it does? It only says approximate. It can be council actions, back a fag packet type approximate as well. I don't know how you're going to go for any sort of funding if you don't know how much funding you require.
Chair, if Councillor Smith is happy to amend my amendment to say that we only need to do a back of a fag packet calculation, then I'd be more than happy to support that. And I think that is something we'd all be more than happy to approve.
Chair, I'd like to move next business and that we actually vote on the amendment.
I'm not sure about back a fag packet, but I'm happy with approximate costs.
We have to vote on Councillor Pullen's amendment, which, does everybody know what that is now? You want me to read it out? Yes. All those in favour of Councillor Pullen's amendment?
Chair.
All those against the amendment?
The amendment falls.
The amendment falls.
So
Councillor,
now we take a vote on the substantive motion.
what about
Yeah, we take a name vote.
you want Councillor Ashton?
Yeah, if he wants the right to reply, Councillor Ashton has the right to.
Councillor Ashton, you have the right to reply. Do you wish to speak?
Well, it appears that the it appears that we have delayed the report, and with that Councillor Pullins.
Yes.
I yield to Councillor Bragger. Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I did not realise you wished to come back again.
Yeah, no, that was an amendment before. Thank you, Chair. I several opposition councillors councillors opposite have said similar things. I won't go through, but by individual names. I do understand that this is challenging, but because it's challenging doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It is, if we were to put these solar panels on, it would cost money. However, it's an investment which would produce revenue for the benefit of the residents. And whatever council succeeds this one under local government reorganisation, it will still be an investment that has been made that will produce revenue for the people of that council. So the people of Lichfield District will benefit. How popular it is, I've noticed that Lichfield Live carried this morning, and in a few hours there were something like 72 likes and 28 comments, nearly all very positive. It isn't something that we're doing against public opinion, and I know that's only a small bit on Facebook, but usually Facebook are against whatever a council does, and they kind of rubbish it if the council says something. It's quite clear that this could be popular. I don't see a downside to this motion. If solar car parks are viable, they will produce clean energy, they will help decarbonise Lichfield, and there'll be an investment producing an income, and they will shield cars from the extremes of weather. The timescales may be challenging, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, but it's important that we get benefits as soon as possible. And this is underway next year, and it will show the way for whatever unitary council. If this is a success, whatever council we go into, we'll be able to replicate that across the new council. I second this motion.
On advice, I'm told that as you've already spoken, Councillor Salter.
If I may, Chair, it's just on a particular point raised.
Oh.
We've had a new comment made. Are we not allowed to talk on it?
Right. Yeah. So we'll move on to Councillor Ashton's right to reply.
My right to reply. I think that all that is going to be said has been said. I have no further comment to make.
Right, we've had a request for a named vote, so we move to the Chief Executive for to take the named vote.
Thank you, Chair. I trust councillors are all aware of which version of the motion we are now calling the name vote for. Okay, so I'll call for a name vote of all those who were here for the entirety of the debate. If I could ask you when I call your name to declare if you are for, against or abstaining from the amended motion. Councillor Anketel. For. Councillor Ashton. Councillor Ball. For. Councillor Benavicius. Councillor Booker. Councillor Braga. For. Councillor Checker. Oh, sorry, Checkland. I said Checker. Yep. I'll do that again. Councillor Checkland. Thank you. Councillor Coe. Councillor Cox. Councillor D. Ennis. Councillor L. Ennis. Councillor Evans. Councillor Farrell. Councillor Harvey Coggins. Councillor Henshaw. Councillor Hill. Councillor Holland. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Leung. Councillor Marshall.
Against.
Councillor Mears. Councillor Norman.
For.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Pullen.
Against.
Councillor Ray.
For.
Councillor Rushton. Councillor Salter.
Against.
Councillor Sylvester Hall. Councillor A. Smith.
Against.
Councillor J. Smith. Councillor P. Taylor. Councillor S. Taylor. Councillor Vernon.
Against.
Councillor Wallens. Councillor Warfield. Councillor Whitehouse. Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Woodward. And Councillor Yates. Thank you very much.
The motion is passed by 20 votes to 19. So we move on to the final item, which are questions which we all have received copies of, but by now I've lost them. Right. So question from Councillor Henshaw to the Leader of the Council. Is there a supplementary question?
Yes, a personal supplementary question. How would Councillor Pullen rate his negotiations with Network Rail?
Councillor Pullen?
I would rate the fact that we were even able to have negotiations, and I say we because it was the council, of course, as a brilliant outcome for the council. It took us a number of years to even get Network Rail to the table to talk to us. Network Rail are not involved in many of these projects up and down the country, and we are fairly unique in that regard. In terms of concessions won from Network Rail, we got as much as we were ever going to get, I think, would be my assessment of that. But I do appreciate that Network Rail have a fairly standard lease that they provide. There is very, very little wriggle room. The reality is that, you know, I think we got as much as we were ever going to get out of them.
Question from Councillor Woodward to the Leader of the Council. Is there a supplementary question? Councillor Woodward.
I'd like to thank Councillor Pullen for his answer and to show to the public, if there's anyone still watching, that we do agree on some occasions and on this one particularly. So I'm pleased to see this. And apart from the resolutions that we passed tonight, I've noted that there were several responses to individual members saying I will follow up. So can you tell me, please, whose responsibility it is to track those actions? Is it yours, Councillor Pullen? Is it the chair as the leader of this meeting, or is it officers who follow those up? Thanks.
Councillor Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. I have some skills in life, not many, but I've got some. Administrative skills are not one of them, so you would not want to rely on me to make sure that those are all fully tracked, although I have texted Councillor Strachan already tonight to make sure that he engages with you, Councillor Taylor, about the budget. You'll be pleased to know that our governance team will track those and make sure that they're a formal record off the back of the meeting to ensure there's transparency and that we're able to track those and monitor action and progress against them. Thank you.
A question from Councillor Norman to the Leader of the Council. Is there a supplementary question, Councillor Norman?
No, Chair, I'm just impressed with the answer because I know that the officers have to follow a particular formula from the Electoral Commission and I'm impressed with it, but no supplementary question. Thank you.
Thank you. A question from Councillor P. Taylor to the Leader of the Council. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, there is, Chair. Thank you. I appreciate the Leader's emphasis on meaningful action, but when councils are banning pride flags from their buildings across the country, surely symbolic gestures themselves become acts of resistance and demonstrations of support. At a time when LGBTQ+ visibility is under attack, wouldn't flying the pride flag demonstrate that Lichfield District Council refuses to be swept along by this regressive trend? Would the Leader commit to flying the pride flag next June to send this clear message?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. The pride flag has never been banned in this building. Indeed, it has been displayed within this building. We've not changed our stance on this at all. And that policy decision is not mine to make. It is made elsewhere. So, as I say in my answer, we absolutely stand with all members of our community. We take great pride in the work that we've done to build that inclusive culture, and we will continue to do all we can to support all members from right across our community.
And that brings our live broadcast to an end.